Okay, so the first thing you want to do is set up the cameras. And this, even though I'm using the Nexus 7 skin here in the emulator, you're actually running this camera application on Pixel 2, modified Pixel 2s, sort of non-stock Pixel 2 cameras. But it is just an application running on an Android operating system, and it is an application called Table Camera, and it's got this sort of collage icon here. So if you were setting up the system, for the first time that day, or maybe you set it up on a Monday and you let it run for the week. I'm not sure, whatever your cycle is going to be, but when you go to turn on the cameras for the first time, you click that app and it will take you into the user interface for the camera application. And there's a number of settings. I'll go over all of them, but it's really quite simple for you to set up the cameras. So this is a port setting here, and in general, unless you're told otherwise, just leave it. It'll be set properly. When we come in to set you up the first time, properties are preserved. So when we set you up for the first time, we would do something like this. Will be something like stream.ppc .andros.ca. So that'll get set up like that, and then once it's saved, I don't know why it does that. So watch, when I go out of this app and go back in, that'll be saved, so it's there. So once it's set, you don't need to worry about that. So our first time config, we'll be setting this property, we'll get you up and running, and that'll be set. And for the most part, you'll never have to change that, but that's what it is. It's a streaming address and a port. Then you have another number over here that's pretty much set. Like for the base package, there's 3 cameras. So this parameter just basically tells the server on connection that I'm camera X of 3. So if you're camera 1, so camera 1 goes behind the dealer, you would specify the 1 there. And again, as long as we label the camera on the back, we'll put like a sticky number on the back of the camera. In this case, camera 1, we'll put a 1 on the back, and then that way if you're tearing it down and setting it back up, as long as you just always put the camera that's labeled camera 1 behind the dealer where it belongs, then you never have to change that again. For whatever reason you mix them up, just be aware, like if here's your table here, you have camera 1 behind the dealer, camera 2 over here between seats 3 and 4, camera 3 over here between seats 6 and 7. So that's your setup. So yeah, so for the first camera, you make it camera number 1. You do need low frame rate turned on. Just don't have enough bandwidth for high frame rates. But even though don't worry about the term, low frame rate just means it isn't the highest frame rate, but it is excellent frame rate. Low def, this is only a checkbox for testing purposes on lower bandwidth networks, so you want that off, but you definitely need compression on because of bandwidth. You need the phone to be compressing frames for us, and that's what that specifies. And then you definitely need to do a synchronous start, so you keep this checkbox set. And then what you do is you decide which of your cameras you want to also be your table audio source, and pick one and only one of them. So if we wanted to turn it on, we wanted the audio to be picked up by the camera behind the dealer, which is the one in a lot of my setups and demos I do, that's what I do. I pick the one behind the dealer. It really doesn't matter. The audio pickup off of these cameras is unbelievable. Either one of them will be good. But that's generally your setup. Audio on, synchronous start on, compression on, low def off, low frame rate on. Specify your camera number. So you would do this setup for all 3 cameras. And the only difference between the cameras is this number here and whether or not it's audio. When all 3 of those cameras are set up, then you would go and you would hit start. And when you hit start, that means this synchronous start gives you the opportunity to just, gives you a minute or so to walk around and hit start on all 3 cameras. So in general, like if you're setting up and it's already been configured, you're literally just turning on the phone, hitting start on every camera. And then what happens is you'll see when it starts and it connects, you'll get a viewfinder here. And I can't do it because I'm running in the emulator. Not sure what happens if I hit start. Well, so it shows starting, right? So this will show starting while camera 1 is waiting for the other 2 cameras to get started. Once they all start, this will go switch to configured, and there'll be like a window here of a preview. And so because I'm running on an emulator, I'm not actually connected to a server. I'm not getting a preview here. But this is an example of what you'd see in the preview window. Obviously, it's the viewfinder, the shot of what you're taking. And this is almost set up right. I would say you want this camera angle a little bit more like direct at seat 2. In this case, so this is camera 3's preview finder that we're looking at. So I think this one, when I was first doing this demo shot, the camera was a little long in the shot, a little long in the room. But from a zoom perspective, it's almost right. Like if this was sort of rotated a little bit this way, so that the angle's a little bit more on 2, then from a zoom perspective, you're bringing in the rail, and that's basically where you want your initial zoom setting. The way you get that is, oh, there we go. Now the camera's showing up. So for some reason I had to toggle in order to get that. So so this is your preview. So the preview that this is just a mock preview from the emulator, but what you'd really be seeing in your preview is something like this. What you'll do is you'll use this zoom to adjust that zoom level to get it what's called the initial zoom level. So the system tells these cameras to zoom in, zoom out, zoom way in, depending on how things are unfolding in the game. So this is just the initial zoom, and when you set this manually, what that does is it resets the initial zoom. And so even if you get things started and you set the initial zoom and you find the footage that's coming out isn't quite right, you want to dial that in again, you can go back to the camera and manually readjust the zoom for that camera if you want to. But again, like I said, once you get that set up, you're pretty much turning it on and pressing start on all 3 cameras. And as long as you hit start on all 3 cameras within a minute, you get a perfect start. And that's really all there is to it. So for example, that zoom setting was set, I come back in, you'll notice that zoom setting is exactly where we left it. So once you get it set up, once all the properties are remembered for that camera, as long as that camera goes in the tripod and the tripod is positioned in the same spot on the floor relative to the table, you're up and running very quickly.